So in the mail a few days ago, this envelope arrived from France. It came from Pascal. I think I've mentioned him in a couple previous videos on the on this project. And of course, what was in the package were 3 of this first spin of the Sprinter 1L overclocking modules for the TRS-80 Model I. So in a previous video, if you haven't seen it, I have an original Sprinter card, and we stripped that card down to the blank PCB. I got a lot of nice high-res photos for Pascal, and then he reverse engineered the board and then spun up a new PCB with that same design on it. There's a couple minor differences here. Actually, I guess really only one. The original Sprinter had 4 1K ohm resistors kind of in this space down here, and he changed that to be a resistor network just because the resistors didn't fit here. If you saw where I reassembled the board, I put 2 of those resistors on top and 2 on the bottom of the PCB just to make room. I think I've got all the parts except for 2 TTL devices to complete this build. So in this video, we're just going to solder up what we can on the board, and I'll have to do an order for the last 2 remaining devices, and this will take long enough. It'll be a couple of videos, 2 or 3. I believe Ian, who out of Australia, you see him on eBay, who sells a lot of reproduction cards for the TRS-80 series, will be selling these. I believe that's going to be the case. I'm told this board is a little bit too big when it's plugged in. And so it interferes with the case, and some edge here, probably this edge, has to be filed down a bit. They'll take care of that, I believe, in the final spin of the board. But I'm looking forward to putting this together and giving it a test in my hacked up Model I. I've got, I think, all the components I have in stock here on the bench. See if TTL devices, some resistors, sockets, decoupling caps. And I do have a box of resistor networks here. This is a mix of reclaim and new stuff. And we'll see if we can pull out the proper resistor networks from this box. Hopefully we can. I've got a good little section of 1K bust here and a bunch of just random stuff. So we'll see what we end up with. So I guess with that, we can dive into this. So if I remember putting the other card together, it seemed easiest to really start with the resistor network, because we're soldering. We've got these pins that go on the bottom of the card that go into the original Z80 socket, and it's a little bit tight in here to solder. Don't remember the exact order I did this. I think I want to start with trying to get the resistor networks in. So let's open up the resistor network box and see if we have anything appropriate. So I've got a bunch of 1K here. These are pull-up resistors, so anything near 1K is going to work. I wouldn't go less than 1K just because of the fan out on the old TTL logic on the TRS-80s. So a lower value resistor is going to require more current. Of course, to pull that pin down to a 0 where the resistor is trying to pull it up to the positive rail. But if I don't have any luck with the 1Ks, we'll move on to maybe some 1.2s and see what we've got. So that said, let me get the somewhat better glasses on. This looks like a new old stock, and I suspect that's the one we need right there. So it's the right physical size. I'm going to fire up the ohm meter here, just because I want to make sure this is a bust part. And make sure the resistance it's labeled 102, so it should be 1K. But what we should find here is that pin 1 should be the common pin, and then every other pin should show a 1K ohm resistor. And of course the cable gremlins have been here overnight and have twisted these cables all up, because you know I would never do anything to twist them up. Yeah, they're always twisted up. So let me just kind of walk down all the resistors in this. Oh, I'm in volts mode. Got to go to ohms. I'm using my Rigol 996 ohms. A bench ohm meter for this, 997, 996, 996, very repeatable, 996, 997, 995, 995. So that guy's immediately well within tolerance. So we will use him. Now let's look for a, how many pins is this? 1, 2, 3, 4. Do I have any 5 pins kind of floating around in here? I don't. It's not in this pile, so let me get these put back in the box. And we'll do some more digging and see what we can come up with. So a fair amount of these are pulls, and especially with the pulls, always validate, you know, measure every resistor. They're fairly fragile, and desoldering could certainly damage them. I've had good luck with pulls. I think that red one that just dropped into the 1.2K. Might be a problem. See if tools, you can never spot the one you want. Oops. A little bit of garbage there stuck on the needle nose, and let's retrieve this red one here. Oh, come on, don't hide. And it's labeled 102, so it's a 1K. Do a bit of 1, 2, 3, that's 6 pins. I'm not seeing any short ones in here. That's up at 5.1K. Getting too big. Let's see what I've got in the bags. 220, 33K, 4.7. $390, $82, couple 1K there. Actually, thinking about these bags, these are almost all, well, it's a mix of non-bust and bust. It's written on the bags, but I'm not seeing anything here. How many pins did I decide that was? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see lots of 6 pin here. That's 380 ohm. I may end up using a larger one and just trimming off the unused pins. I've seen a few people actually cut them. That kind of spooks me a bit. Not seeing the resistance on there, and also don't know if it's bust or not. Man, really need to straighten up the bench. Yeah, that's 391 ohm. That's not going to be a usable value. Now I'm looking more for size. This is just this, oh, well, it's all labeled non-bus, so I probably want to ignore that. Miscellaneous bus, 223 ohm. I don't know if a 10K would work in that position or not. Let's see, that is up right near the Z80 in the socket, so I could honestly just use 4 resistors in there and kind of make my own bus resistor. We'll do that in the video. So as I recall, pin 1 is over here, and I can see where the little trace goes up to why is there an open hole? Oh, this guy's a pin too short. Yeah, he's too small. Didn't pay enough attention, so we got somebody a little longer. Like the red one we retrieved earlier looks like it might be a pin longer. Really? How many? Actually, no, that's a via. What I saw as an extra hole was a via, so we're fine. With this one, make sure I've got pin 1 in the right orientation. I'm just going to tack a single pin in place. No, I've got the tip on the pencil, the one I want for soldering. Luckily this guy hot swaps really easily. It's actually got in my JVC stand, there's actually a little built-in mechanism for removing a pin or removing a tip. Actually got that really straight the first time. He's good enough that I'm happy with him, so let's go ahead and finish the soldering here. Back to the original pin I tacked just to make sure we've got a good joint. So with that in, I really think the next thing to solder is going to be these pin headers. There's plenty of clearance from there to the socket pin, so I can get in there and solder easily. So let's take care of that next. And I believe this is a full 40 pin header here. If you remember how we did this before, I actually used a socket for alignment. I'm just going to drop the socket down into the board. The socket's got a bent pin. I would prefer a higher quality socket, but this is a dual wipe, so get those kind of centered. Get them centered again. I'm just using that as an alignment rig to hopefully well, we'll find out if it'll clear the trying to put it on the wrong side of the board. So used to doing front load. There's that. There we go. And by using the, of course the socket as a template to hold them square and at the 600 mils, we'll get a better job. So that looks okay to me. Let's tack the corners. Check again for flush. It's not totally in flush on this side. So let's heat the pin and push, and I did feel it move a tiny bit. That row's now flush. Either one of these on this side is flush, so I'm going to heat and press. I felt it move. You may be hearing that little pop as it moves. Those look flush. Those look flush. I think we're safe to solder. And we'll again solder the rest of the pins, and I'll come back to the two end pins and just reflow them. Now, there was on my original Sprinter card an extra 1K ohm resistor tacked to the back of the board, and I've got an email in my queue from, I hate to admit it, a couple weeks ago from Pascal asking about that resistor. It came from the factory that way. At least it came in the Model I I bought that way. I don't know if it was added on factory. It's just plain pull-up. If somebody had issues and added it themselves, if it's got to do maybe with dealing with the expansion interface, just don't know. I didn't look at the schematic to figure out what signal it was. TTL devices have a thing called fan out, and that has to do with how much current they can either provide or sink into the circuit, and it's basically the number of standard TTL inputs that an output can drive. And old TTL, like these devices, it wasn't a huge amount of current. I think I saw on a forum recently somebody said it was 23 milliamps. Kind of typical in the Radio Shack series. I haven't confirmed that. But later generation TTL had higher drive current. So I'm debating here whether to leave that socket on there to protect those pins. I think we're actually going to be okay. Let me lift this socket up off. Maybe. If I can get this to lever. And of course the socket for the Z80 goes on the top of the board. Notch in the socket to pin 1. I almost put the socket in backwards. We've got a notch in the silkscreen. Got plenty of room there on the back side to create a little resistor network of my own. Put a bit of tape on that to hold it, and flip the board over. Tack opposite corners. Check it for flush. And finish soldering it. You know, the PC board itself looks really nice. I would guess he's getting these fabbed out of China. A lot of really inexpensive PCB manufacturers in China that do really good jobs with the boards. You know, this board looks completely acceptable to me. It is a nice looking board. All of these that have kind of come this way have been. Just check one more time. Boy, I can tell I haven't had enough coffee yet this morning. It's Saturday here outside of Seattle. It's cool out. You can probably hear the crows. We have a lot of crows in the neighborhood here. Have a lot of crows everywhere up here, it seems. A think it's going to be a really pleasant day. Need to be a little more careful in here because I don't want to touch the pins on those pin headers. Not sure how centered in frame I am here. Really need to upgrade how I shoot video. So I've actually got a monitor so I can see. I've just got, I think I've mentioned it before, a custom built kind of rig mounted from the ceiling up above the bench here that an iPhone drops into, and that is my primary camera. The channel, isn't monetized. You're not getting commercials. I'm not asking for Patreon money. As I've said before, I'd be doing this on my own, even if I wasn't shooting video. So it's kind of nice to be able to share this with the people who are interested. I'm not getting as nice looking a solder joints as I'd like. Come back to the original pin. So I think I'm going to tackle this missing resistor network here first. And I'm thinking about how to do this. So I definitely need 1K ohm resistors. This box is a mix of 10K and 1K. You do kind of got to pay attention to the color coding. These are black or brown, black, red, so they are 1K. And I'm going to need actually I'm going to need 4 of them. No, yeah, 4 of them. These of course have glue left on the pins. I'm just gonna, just with my fingers, kind of wipe that little bit of glue off. And I'm just gonna stand up resistors in the holes here. You want them all the same orientation. Not that it matters, they're not polarized, but the aesthetic matters to me. Don't really care which orientation they're in as long as they're all the same. I need to figure out how to kind of hold those in place. Going to use a bit of tape there. I'm going to tack those pins. Oops. All the same height. I've just bent them a little bit to get them square to the board. I'll trim off the leads here. I need a new pair of cutters. These have a nick in them from me cutting something way too hard for them. Little lead come out of there. Wow, that's really stuck there. Actually, I should have thought about this in advance. I'm going to remove this one resistor here on the end. maybe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend the pin here on this side to get essentially 0.1 spacing. That's a little wider than 0.1, but it'll work. I need to clean that hole out. With a sea of solder wick, I never find what I want. So we'll try to do this from the top of the board. Didn't think this through. Let's see if I can get that to pull the solder up out of there. Now it's not going to cooperate. Can I get him? Oh, I always make things hard, don't I? Do I have a manual desoldering pump laying around here? I own several, but I don't tend to use the manual ones. And they do vanish pretty quickly. Wow, really don't see one. Well, I'm going to heat up the desoldering gun here and pause the video, and we'll come back and continue this. So I thought I should probably talk about the difference between a bust and a non-bust resistor pack. This will help you understand what I'm doing with the regular resistors. So bust, if we take the package here, we've got the pins coming out the bottom of the package, and I'll just draw in 5 pins. There's usually pin 1 is marked on a bust package, so I'll put a dot here to indicate pin 1. And what bust means is I have individual resistors inside of the package. And it means they're all bust together internally. So this is the common pin, pin 1. And the idea here is if I got plus 5 volts on here, I've got a 1K ohm pull-up resistor here, and a 1K ohm pull-up resistor here, and a 1K here, etc. And so by bust, it means they're all bust together. So typically on a PCB, you're going to see the holes you're going to solder into. And often you might see that the common pin is square, or it might be round with a silkscreen ring around it, something to indicate that that's pin 1. If we take the non-bust, we kind of do the same drawing here, looking inside of the package, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what you'll see looks like this. So there's 3 independent resistors inside of the package in this example. Bust, non-bust. So in the case of our build here, these are bust pull-up resistors. So they have a common pin, pin 1, and they provide individual pull-up resistors. Since I didn't have the proper resistor network to put in here, I'm building the equivalent with physical resistors. And so if we look at what I'm doing here on the board, make sure this is in shot, is you'll notice, hopefully you can see it, there's a square pad here and there's 4 circular pads. So let's draw those pads out. What I'm doing is soldering a regular resistor here, 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 and here. And that's the 4 resistors you saw me put in. And then I'm going to run a jumper link like so, And these will all be solder joints here. And it becomes the equivalent circuit of this. So it's just, there's the +5 coming in from pin 1 and 4 independent pull-up resistors. And that's what I'm building here, is just with the discrete components, the equivalent of this bus resistor pack here. So let's go ahead and continue doing that work. I've got the desoldering tool heated up. So if I'd have been thinking about this originally, I wouldn't have just mounted all 4 resistors the way I did. I would have actually, get the correct glasses on my face. I would have, if I'd have thought a little bit ahead, I wouldn't have run into this issue here. Okay, that hole has been cleaned out. One of the resistors is actually shifted from the heat. Adjacent resistor. I should be able to just kind of push it back in flush. Here, this is that middle pad. Maybe I can push it back in flush. So the one resistor slipped out a little bit. There it went. Right now these are just kind of tacked in place. I've taken this resistor laying right here, and I've bent the lead. I don't know if this will show up well. Let me flip it over. I bent the lead on one side out and down. I got the other lead all mounted up, and that longer lead there will just solder into this hole. So let's see if I can finagle that into place and get it soldered in. I've done this many times. I'm not sure why I didn't think this through before I started soldering. Too early in the morning, maybe. I just want to kind of hold him in place. And I'll add a little bit of solder on one of the pins to just kind of hold it in place. Make sure it looks okay, and it does. Now what I'm going to do, I have to always think about this a little bit ahead of time, is I'm going to leave this lead long so it can be bent over and reach across. And I'll leave these with a little bit of length so I can kind of bend them to get a bit of a mechanical connection. Hopefully that's enough. Again, this isn't particularly elegant solution, but it'll do the job for what I need to do here. I wish that was a little tighter bend. Where's the there they are. I'm going to try to get a little tighter bend there and not break the resistor off. Still not happy with that. I'm going to take the lead on this side and I'm just going to loop it through to that original resistor. Again, this isn't particularly elegant, but it'll work. Not having as much luck as I'd like making that look decent. Oh, almost knocked the coffee over. Wouldn't that have been exciting? Trim that extra lead out of there and just do a little crimp here so I get a little tighter mechanical connection. And I'm going to go ahead and solder out here to the bus side. Oh, my tip is filthy. I'm going to attempt to make that a little more square. That's better. And I'm just going to take these remaining pins and attempt to bend them over. I don't want to just rely on pure solder without a bit of mechanical connection. Let's see if I can get those to actually bend. I will most likely, when I order the couple of TTL devices I need to finish this build, will order could have waited, I guess, and ordered a resistor pack at the same time, but at the same time I kind of wanted to demonstrate what I'm doing here, just as a kind of a workable solution if you don't have a resistor pack in place. I'm just trying to bend somewhat these pins around each other here just to get a little bit better mechanical connection. And we'll add a bit of solder on those, and it's not pretty, but it will do the job. And let's just make sure all the pins underneath are soldered up well. That's the one that kind of fell out earlier. So we've created our own equivalent of a resistor pack here. One of the dangers in doing it this way, hopefully you can see what I've done here. It's not gorgeous, but it works. One of the dangers in doing this is I now have 5 volts all the way across the top up here. And if this was on a chassis and there was something grounded here, there's a chance I could short that to ground. As a permanent solution, I might cover these in hot glue just to help protect them. But you know, that at least moves out ahead enough that I would hope the circuit's functional. We've got a few other 1K ohm resistors. We've got R7, R5. I thought there was a third on here, an R6, so I need 3 more 1K ohm resistors. I bent that lead a whole lot. Didn't mean to. And find my spacing tool, just because he's got a pretty large. Looks like I can bend these on about 0.45. So we'll do that just as I get a crisper corner there. So sorry about the interruption, phone call. I've got the leads bent here. Well, let's go ahead and put these guys in. There's one there. Oh, those leads are much closer together. I assumed they were all the same spacing, and they weren't. So I may need to rebend the leads on one of these. So those fit just fine. This one, however, the lead spacing is much closer. I'm going to have to hand bend it, it looks like, which is fine. Same orientation as the one there above it. These to kind of flare and hold themselves in, and we'll solder those 3 guys up. Be a little easier to do if I had something to hold the board steady. I've kind of violated my build order here from the lowest profile to the highest profile components, but that is what it is. Trim those leads back. So far the board's coming together really fine. We've got 40 spiking capacitors to put in. These are just 0.1 microfarad disc. I can actually get him to go in. There's one. And as always, even though these little disc caps aren't polarized, I'm just getting them all in facing the same direction. There's one more someplace on the board down here. And those pushed in nice and tight, so I'm not going to worry about bending leads. And that goes obviously across the power rail, as they really all are on these wider traces. The power rail, at least on this board, the wider traces are all power rails. Kind of pushing down on that one through the board. I want to keep it relatively straight. So that moves us on to TTL devices. I need a 74 LS04. I have one right here. There's a dot on the silk screen that indicates the direction it goes in. Do I have an insertion tool laying around here? Maybe make this a little easier to do. The insertion tool will flex the leads in. Maybe. That's not a really good insertion tool. Let's see if there's a better one. Laying back here. This may or may not help. And by not bending the leads in, the spring tension will keep the part in place. I'll make sure I've got the part in the right position. 74 LS04. I got these two devices in wrong orientation, even after double checking against the other board. I've got them swapped 180 degrees, which means they need to be replaced. So while the desoldering station warms up, we'll solder in the 74LS173 or 123, and we'll come back and remove those and spin them around. Even when you pay attention, it's easy to get it wrong. Luckily, I caught it before I put them all in backwards. Always impressive to me how easy it is to screw up, even when you think you're being careful. Having the board flopping around here is not making the soldering here easier. That's for sure. Well, let's see if we can unsolder those. Luckily, I've got a good tool for it. Let's just see how lucky we can get here. Doggone it. I'm just gonna see if it's loose at all. Still a little bit of solder on some of these leads up against that via. A couple of them are being really difficult to pop loose. These old enemy bending pins. There's still a pin caught there. No. Well, that rather sucks. Get him around the right orientation. Let's see if we can get it back into the board. And it's now in the correct way. Point here being, and I've said it before, I leave all my mistakes in the videos because they're easy to do. I've been stuffing boards for decades, and still, just occasionally, you go off in the wrong direction. It's really difficult when you've got 100 ICs soldered in and you realize they're all wrong. That's not a good day. See if the desoldering worked any better on this one. Again, I'm just kind of flexing the leads here in case there's still a bit of solder holding it to the side of the via and the board. Oh, that's still really tight. There it comes. few bend up leads. It's an LS30. We've now rotated 180 degrees. And we'll solder it. Yeah, part of what caught me here is with the board this way, the silk screening is upright and pin 1's up here, and I typically would have, with the letters upright, had pin 1 down here, and it's just the way it was silk screened. It's not a big deal, but that did throw me. Well, in an upcoming video, we'll solder in the other two parts. The ones I don't seem to have in stock. I'm actually surprised I didn't find a 161. The 109, not as surprised. We've got all the logic in. Let's compare to another board for orientation. Pin 1. Sorry, it's kind of hard here to hold this. And hopefully have it in frame. Pin 1, pin 1, pin 1, pin 1, pin 1, and pin 1. Yep. So the orientation is good. Little board's coming together well. So we'll see in the next video if this works or not. So appreciate your watching, and I'll talk soon.